Welcome back. It's 20 minutes to 11 o'clock. Now, Women's Month is drawing to a close this week in our country, but women's empowerment issues will continue. Gender inequality continues. That's why we're discussing this with my panelists this morning. Dr. Gildenhuys, can I start with you? I saw a report that the latest draft of the Employment Equity Amendment Bill was published last month, July, and now it's going to go into Parliament. That's several years after the initial draft. And this new amendment bill could soon empower the Minister of Employment and Labour, Thulas Nxesi, depending when it's passed, to accelerate transformation. Are you confident that a legal stick will do the trick?
I think that there are always two aspects, as I mentioned earlier, is that the amendment bill is proposing sector targets and a far more refined level of target setting to achieve that transformation on the one leg, as it is seen in Chapter 3 of the Act, commonly known as affirmative action. So there is a proposal to look at very specific sector targets. The other aspect of it is the managing of diversity, Chapter 2 of the Act, and that's the eradication of discrimination and the things that we've spoken about here. And I think that although that we work at legislation very strongly on the one side, as I said, some people feel the heat, one must also work at the business case internally and externally for eradicating these stereotyping and building self-confidence so that people are able and willing and allowed to perform in an organization. So there are two legs to this, or two components.
I'm just wondering, Dr. Gildenhuys, that if the 20th Commission, your 20th annual report shows a trend over the last 3 years, 2017, 2018, 2019, where effectively the bottom line is that there's no will to effect transformation. You look at the gender side of it, it's like it's at a standstill. I mean, 75.6% of top management positions last year were male compared to 26.4% for women. That trend has been, those numbers have been pretty much similar since 2017. Why would you think, as a commission, and be hopeful that this amendment bill will do the trick?
Well, I think that in the way in which targets will be set and which is open still for, which will be subject to consultation, but that is the hope, is that when you look at sectors more specifically and what your availability pool is to narrow it down, and that would help us on the one end far more than the self-imposed numerical goals that companies have set up till now, when it is more realistic on what is available.
Okay. Fasiha, do you think programs in companies and organizations, and whether they are political, social, or commercial, should actually rework their programs to address gender diversity properly and ensure inclusivity?
Definitely, and I agree with Dr. Gildenhuys. I've been a lawmaker now for just over a year, and I can tell you very quickly that the legislation is not the problem. It's the implementation, it's the change of culture, and it's exactly what you've just said, the intentional, deliberate ideas that need to be put forward both in corporate and the public sector. And it's also not just about having a program that's a checkbox exercise. I really want to move away from this idea of, right, we're going to have 1 or 2, 3 programs in the year, and that's it. We've done our quota for women empowerment. You know, it needs to be something that goes beyond it. And it also needs to be meaningful. I think before we just have these programs, we need to identify the gaps, whether that be mentorship, whether that be learning the tricks of the trade in different ways, and then fulfill those gaps in a very particular way. So the point is, we need a tailor-made approach. We can have no blanket, one-size-fits-all kind of strategy, because that's clearly not worked up to now.
But the will has to be there. I mean, Dineo, I hear gender mainstreaming is coming up again as a topic for organizations. People are reporting on it. But the gender mainstreaming is not a new concept. It's been there for a long time. But it seems to me that there's a lack of will to gender mainstream in organizations.
That's also a very valid point. And I think when we look at the will and, resistance to gender equality in the workplace, I think part of the problem is that we put a lot of these, personal development programs mainly on women, develop more self-confidence, speak up louder. But I think there's also definitely a gap which is not being addressed, and that is also training men to recognize some of the conscious and unconscious biases that they have and then communicate towards women in the workplace. So I think there's still a lot of training that needs to be done and just sensitization to, the small social cues that, men do in the workplace that obviously disenfranchise women. I think there also needs to be a particular focus on that. And I think once they almost understand some of the pain points that we go through within organizations, perhaps that will then drive them to reconsider, some sort of resistance towards gender equality in the workplace.
Yeah, Ms. Ngonyama, have you felt the pressure as a leader in the business world? I mean, you're still sitting on boards and audit committees that you need to do something as a woman to make sure that in those organizations where you are a director, there is gender mainstreaming, and as Dineo suggested, that maybe the main men in those organizations need to go for some kind of diversity training?
I feel that pressure every day, I like the first part that has been mentioned. If we can do nothing but let men change their attitude toward women, that can change the world. That's my first point. And then secondly, if we are talking about women now ourselves, we do need to pay off. As we grow up, we must lift others, because we must always remember that we stampede on other people, we scaffold on others, we must allow others to scaffold on us as well. The issue of being role model, let's not underestimate that as women. And therefore, how we behave in boardrooms and how we stand up for other women, we should not be ashamed of that.
But sorry to cut in there, but that does not come easy. It's not an easy sacrifice to make, so to speak, or is it?
It's not, but it does pay off in the long run. So initially, the trick that we use, or that has worked for me, you first understand. Find that even in a male environment, there are people who I would call the weakest link. Those people who will understand your point of view and would sponsor you. And once you get in, then it's much easier then to come in and change the culture. You way beyond your sponsors and way beyond the weakest link. It's just that determination from your side and being conscious of the fact that.
Yeah, sorry, Ms. Baba. Yeah, Babalwa, we're having a bit of a connectivity issue with you. It keeps on cutting, but you are making a very, very important point there. But now, if women, you've made a very valid point. I still want to get your view there, even if it's brief. Women are victims or suffer from triple oppression. Let's call it what it is: class, race, and gender. It's become complex. And then you've got culture. Fasiha talks about patriarchy. And then you've got women themselves who don't realize that while they are capable, they need to stand up and be counted and be heard with confidence, as Dineo was alluding to. How, in your view, the future, can we reimagine a future where there's equality on the table?
The first thing is that you need to work with others in this journey. That's very important. As a woman, you must understand that you have got lots of disadvantages. You need men on this role alongside yourself. That's point number one, and a very, very important point. And once you have them next to you, and you build that trust and that strong relationship, it's much easier to turn things around. So what I also want to highlight, ourselves as women, we must make sure that we have our own support structure, we create our own stability, and we build our own security, so that as we fight these wars, we don't fall onto rocks. You secure things like saving, for example. Make sure that you are quite strong as much as you possibly can, so that you don't compromise yourself and find yourself in difficult position because you want money. You see. So there is definitely a lot. And when we work together as women as well in boardrooms, I find that we are able to push far more. So we discuss this plan, we strategize even before a board meeting. We make sure that the business strategy includes women empowerment, and the measurement and the incentivization of management. How management is incentivized, it includes it includes bringing women on board. That works because then you're talking money. You are hitting people where it matters, you see. Yeah. And once women are there as well, don't leave them alone, bring them mentors. I always say that, I mean, let's look even at big players like Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods has a coach. You know, coaching does not mean that you are weak. You know, big players like Cristiano Ronaldo, they will talk tomorrow about every time they talk about coaches and visiting their coaches every now and again. But sometimes as women,
Okay, sorry, the connectivity. Sorry, Ms. Ngonyama. Sorry to cut in. I got the gist of the point. Working together, mentorship is important, and strategize together. As we're about to wrap, I just want to give the final word to the two young women among us this morning, Fasiha and Dineo, because that's the future. Both of you are not even 30 years old, and you are already subjected to this kind of discrimination, obviously. But if you had to imagine a future, Fasiha, let me start with you to conclude, without this topic, how do we get there, very briefly? How do we get there?
Must be systemic. It can't just be one or two women who are making it. We need to create an environment in which all women can make it. So for me, it's about systemic change and systemic fundamental change as well. Of course, that does mean legislation. It does mean the right programs, but it also means women supporting women. We must never find ourselves being that woman or the only woman who sits at the table and being comfortable with that. We need to do everything in our power to ensure we open up the space to more women and support them as they go through the process. Like I said, laying the pave way.
Thank you very much, Fasiha. Dineo?
Absolutely, I completely agree with those points, and I'd just like to add that I think I really want to iterate on the fact that, you know, we should be advocating for men as well in the workplace to be more sensitized to some of the pain points that we struggle with within the organization, and really just to teach them some of the conscious and unconscious biases that they have towards women. Another thing that I would like to add is that, you know, as we transition to where we are, from where we are to where we want to be, we can't not acknowledge the fact that majority of management is still male run. So can men also create safe spaces for us to come and reach out to them for mentorship? Yes, we'll have mentorship from women, but as well from men, because they're still partly in these management positions. But can they create these safe spaces where it's okay for us to reach out and say, can we, pick your brain over lunch? You know, don't, for example, ask me to come and have a conversation with you over dinner, because probably that won't happen, because I probably wouldn't feel like this is a safe space for me.
Thank you very much. Safe spaces are important here. Thank you very much, Dineo Leoma. Thank you, Fasiha Hassan. Thank you, Dr. Annelie Gildenhuys and Babalwa Ngonyama, for the discussion we've had here. Very insightful, and I really appreciate you taking the time this morning to talk about women in leadership and how do we reimagine a different future where there's genuine, meaningful participation of women in the top echelons of organizations in society.